We need to just step into a quick word from a sponsor. Now, this is the one exception for the day. This is a sponsor on a panel a little bit later on. We just happen to have two sponsors on that panel, so we decided to invite them to speak to the sponsor on the panel. Word from a sponsor session. Now, Siglin, if you're there, can I bring you to the microphone?
I am here. Thank
Brilliant.
you very much.
Just 2 minutes about varnish, and then we'll move on to the next panel.
Thank you for having us. So I'm Guillaume Quintard, Principal Solution Engineer at Varnish Software. And yeah, we're very happy to sponsor this event. I've seen a few familiar faces, so most of you already probably know what we do, but for those who don't, we do CDN software. We basically offer solutions for companies to build or enhance their delivery pipeline over the internet. And we have two goals. The first one is really to scale from the small local e-commerce website to the very large media delivery platform. And we want to be able to do that on bare metal, virtual machines, of course, containers, and that can be private or public clouds, and with 5G MECs platforms too. The second thing is really we want to be modular, and we really want to be extremely versatile, because we are going to serve media streaming, we are going to serve games, APIs, and of course, regular websites. And the way we approach that is having multiple components that you can mix and match. We are, of course, well known on the open source side for caching, but we also have access control, WAF, routing, orchestration, and so on. So the idea is really you can pick and choose what components you want to build the best platform for the needs you have currently, but also be sure that you have something that is going to grow with you as those requirement changes. And yeah, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm done pushing my stuff here, but I'll be around, and I will come back for a panel with Brett and Adrian. So see you there, and I will stick around, of course. Thank you very much. Dom, we don't
Dom, you're on mute.
Your lips are moving, but we can't hear what you're saying, Dom.
There you go. It's so fast paced. I forgot to press the mute button. There we go. So that was awesome. Thank you very much, Guillaume. It is so fast paced today. We've slightly overshot. So do remind you, we need to finish on the half hour. I'm at fault for that one because I overran my own panel and I had an hour, but I'll shut up now and pass it over to Eric and Tim. Eric, take over.
Thank you very much, Dom. Do we have Eric, Robert, and Pankaj? Oh, looks like you're all out there. Excellent. Good to see you all.
We are.
Hey. Excellent. Yes, and Tim as well.
Here.
All right. So we have a terrific chance to chat with folks from Disney Streaming. Obviously, looking back about a year to just before the first virtual content delivery summit, the big news, or one of the big news items, was the launch of Disney Plus. Now, Disney Streaming is, of course, a lot more than just Disney Plus. And so I am thrilled that we have Eric Klein returning to the screen. He's the Director of Media Distribution and Technology, CDN, for Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN Plus, and Star Plus. Is that correct?
Yeah, Disney Streaming. We encompass it all.
You're all Disney Streaming now, right?
We're all one big family now.
Okay. Yep. And Robert Colantuoni, did I pronounce that kind of correctly?
You did a good job, Eric.
All right, I appreciate you not criticizing me. Who's the CDN performance architect for Disney streaming services, and Pankaj Chaudhari, architect for video delivery, right? And I murdered your name, didn't I?
No, I'm still alive. You did a really good job. Thank you.
Well, let's jump right in. We're going to try to get things back on track time-wise, but we've got a lot to cover. And I'd like to go back to some of the things that came up in one of the very first sessions today. And whether or not you were watching, I think it's something that you can all comment on. Elsa Pine was on fire this morning. talking about just how much of a challenge content delivery is facing right now, given that over the last 15 months, we've seen this unprecedented, there's that word again, increase in demand. At the same time, that stress is being put on networks internationally. We're seeing challenges in terms of both manpower and hardware and equipment to build out networks. I'm wondering if one of you could kick things off by talking about the challenges you've faced over the last 12 to 15 months, specifically thinking about those areas.
So I'll kick it off and then I'll pass it to the rest of the team. In our approach to how we've gone about reaching different customers in different markets across the world, we're cognizant of those challenges, right? Different networks are going to be challenged in different regions. There's always going to be shortages in terms of what and how you can get your content to different customers and where you might have to form partnerships, whether it be through commercial CDNs, whether it be through open caches or developing your own appliances. And so for us, we've kind of taken a holistic approach of, we're going to look at what's the best way to get to every individual market through a distribution mesh, considering any of those 3 different routes to market and always having those available to us. It's a longer term strategy that we're laying the foundation for. We started 12 months ago. We're continuing it through today and onward, with the whole team kind of unified behind those efforts. But ultimately, it's saying there are limitations, there are constraints. One single route to market's never going to be the right way to go. And understanding what the whole marketplace is challenged by helps us when it comes to planning for the different scaling concerns we have to do to take into account in every different market we might launch in. And that's true for any of our solutions, right? Disney Plus is obviously a global solution. Hulu's North American focused, ESPN Plus North American focused, and then Star Plus, the forthcoming service in Latin America. So there's different markets, there's different areas, there's different concerns. And as the growth comes, it's our job to figure out for every individual solution what's the right way to market.
Rob, Pankaj, do you have any take on that or any additional take on that?
Yeah. So Eric touched a little bit on the mesh portion of it, and I don't think it's I think it's pretty well known in the industry that we're a big supporter of like open cache, right? So that's one big part of the mesh. But when you start going into utilizing multi-tenant and a mix of CDNs and a mix of open caches for to kind of alleviate capacity concerns either on a continent basis or a regional basis or even like a per ASN basis, you need to have a control plane that can handle all of the data sources and handle pushing traffic into, divvying it up, dependent upon which ASN, which region, which continent you're in, right? And then you have to be able to track performance relative to your options in those particular regions. And so, you can easily say, we're going to adopt a mesh delivery system, multi-tenant, we're going to utilize open cache. But there's a large amount of back-end control plane and measurement and observability that goes into that in order to, route traffic in a way that will continue to provide the best service for your customers.
So I know performance is critical from your standpoint, and that's what you focus on. You mentioned the open caching piece. What other elements of caching beyond just, say, open cache standards have you all implemented to deal with the growth?
I think, Rob, go ahead, since you seemed like you were going to jump on it.
Go for it, DC, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to add, when you look into from a growth point of view, right, you're looking for capacity and then obviously performance too. So with this mesh pulling in all these different CDN solutions into a single umbrella, but the practicalities of it comes down to making sure all these providers are providing a base level of functionality. At least at the end of the day, they do HTTP 1.1. That's great. But obviously, that's just the extreme bare minimum. You're dealing with H2, H3, as these things are coming up, you're dealing with, from a security point of view, TLS-1, the cyber suits they support. You're dealing with visibility, as Rob mentioned. We need to be kind of taking in all this data in our control plane, but that data has to be coming in the right format, the right metrics, and the right latency, the speed as well too. So we can have quicker visibility and oversight into making decisions as well too. So that is probably one kind of a big challenge when we onboard new CDN partners to kind of help augment the existing capacity to add more, is that does that new partner provide us that base level of functionality? If they're not, then sure, you have lots of fiber laid out, but we can't necessarily use you to the extent we want to. So I think that's a critical thing. So involvement on the open standard side, including open caching, is very critical for us, and we kind of hope for all our CDN partners to be kind of engaging very actively on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
to cue off of that really quick, here's a good example of that is that, we talk about open cache standards. The capacity, the SVA capacity API is one of those that we're kind of working on, right? And it's easy to look at it as just a standard, we're coming up with a standard, but it's actually a dynamic system that we're trying to put into place, and how that feeds into the Disney ecosystem is equally important, right? We're pushing it on the open cache side, but as we're also additionally pushing it towards our CDN vendors, because if we are trying to manage our capacity and we need to fundamentally understand the capacity of the CDN providers that we're utilizing. So part of our support of things like the SVA open caching API is we really need to have this kind of back and forth conversation with the CDNs and our open caching providers in a way that we have a full visibility of what the capacity looks like on the edge, and then we can be very dynamic and very responsive to concerns where there's capacity constraints in certain regions in response to internet weather, or fiber seeking backhoes or something like that.
Sure.
Robert, you talked about, different regions, and Eric, earlier you mentioned that you look at each market that you're going to expand into and evaluate that market and proceed accordingly. Could you get a little bit more specific about the specific challenges you've faced in different geographies, so that maybe you can share what some of those roadblocks have been and how you've overcome them?
Sure. I'll touch on one, and then I'll actually pass to Rob for a little bit more. One of the areas that's always a major concern is when you're launching in a brand new market or territory, such as when we launched Disney Plus in Latin America, you don't know what to expect. What's the average bit rates the consumers are going to engage with? What's the device mix that you have to concern yourself with, which in turn informs a lot of the performance expectations you might have? What's just generally the networks that are going to get engaged and involved with to such a large extent? Where are your customers going to be? In which countries, in which regions, in which markets? And you want to ensure you have the best performance for those customers, but you also have to pre-plan and ensure you have the enough capacity to reach those customers. So we have a lot of capacity planning rules that go into how we shape our traffic and how we decide where and what becomes the baseline into our smarter decisioning system. But on top of that, there's a lot of pre-planning, and I would call it smart assumptions that you need to make and comparative assumptions you need to make. And for that, I'll pass to Rob, who unfortunately finds himself consistently having to deliver on those.
Yeah, we like to call those models. It sounds better than assumptions when you're talking to the execs. But yeah, we build a lot of data modeling. So we actually have a group within Disney proper. It's within the House of Mouse, and they're called Decision Science. And these guys grew out of a group that was looking at things like hotel soap purchases and these sorts of things. And they essentially build models around like, everything from contract wise, et cetera, et cetera. And we've been leveraging them for a lot of data modeling for these types of things like capacity decay models and those sorts of things. But when we went in and we did our LATAM launch, we didn't have, like Eric said, we didn't have any data on the ground because none of our existing services had launched there. And so in addition to gathering top level capacity numbers, which was done by our peer Chris Christensen at Disney. We also went and were able to acquire similar kind of performance numbers for regions that looked very similar to the LATAM client mix. So we looked at LATAM and we said, okay, this is the kind of regional connectivity we're looking at. This is the type of client mix we're looking at. Are there any other regions that we're currently serving in the United States or overseas that look very similar? And can we use those as a model to essentially build a set of KPIs for that region, so that out of the gate we understand what performance should be, what kind of performance baselines need to be, and then we set all of our alerts and our run books and everything based on that. So that was just one of the strategies. It was a little ad hoc for our LATAM launch. I think for Star Plus, the model is much more robust now that we have data behind it.
So having worked with global projects where we looked at average revenue per user, and I don't want you to get into business numbers, but does decisioning science actually think about that model as well when you go into a market? So you're talking about capacity issues, but there's also average revenue per user and whether it's worth approaching a market in a given time. Is that something that's decided?
I'm going to feign a no answer here. Okay. But I will say that for our use of decisioning and data science directly, for our technology needs, at least, we talk to them about capacity. Okay. That's our primary relationship with them from a day in, day out standpoint. But certainly, as I'm sure you can understand, there are all of these other concerns that we have to consider as we deliver to our customers.
And Eric, you mentioned, when you went into LATAM, I mean, one of the things you get there that you get in certain other parts of the world is sort of incumbent mobile carriers who are used to a standard way of doing business, shall we say. You're coming in with a service not unlike the way that Netflix faced 8-9 years ago, and we obviously heard somebody talk about that earlier today, Dave Temkin, where they had to put caching into peering points, and the argument from the service provider at that point was, you're using our capacity and you're making money on it. Do you find similar constraints that you're playing with in some of these markets, or are the markets mature enough that they say, yeah, we understand the need for having caching or open caching solutions in place?
It's a great question. I'll take a shot and then I'll pass it to Pankaj a little bit more about some of the strategic approaches we're taking. I think it's fair to say that the way we think about our partnerships in all of these different markets, whether it be domestic or international, is we're very upfront with all of the carrier networks when we launch a new region. Michael Fay, who's our VP of Media Distribution, he has quite a lot of experience in the industry and has a lot of relationships in the industry, and helps us cultivate those conversations both through Disney Business as well as direct to the ISP carriers to make it clear, our standard approach is our standard approach. We're not trying to put anyone at any disadvantage. We're not treating any network differently. We have different routes to market. We lay out the timelines on those different routes to market, and we're very transparent of what our plans are up front. We do try to work with carriers. So if we have carriers reach out to us about mixes or transit challenges that they're having with one network or another, while we won't get involved in those conversations, we will have a dialogue about what way we can maybe shape the traffic a little bit better to ensure better customer performance. And we always, as we've continued to, open caching for us is a key tenet to our strategy, and we really strongly believe in it. And so we're happy to help any of those providers as they explore those solutions and dive deeper in that area. I'll pass it to PC. I don't know, PC, if you have any additional things you might want to add there around some of our strategic efforts and initiatives we're taking.
As far as initiatives are concerned, we definitely kind of want to make sure that all these partners are plugged into some of the forums that we're engaging with, CTA Wave and SVA, so that they're informed in all the progress that's happening there, but they also get an opportunity to voice their own use cases as well too. So it's a lot more informed and a active participation rather than being surprised at the end of the day that here is a spec that they have to implement. And generally there is fair amount of good participation in these forums as well too. So I think that's kind of worked out pretty good. The specs are at a point in time wherein they're about to be available in a draft mode pretty soon. and the implementations will follow as well pretty quickly as well.
Jim from Fastly in the last session talked a little bit about rights, both from a licensing and geofencing perspective. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on how that challenge has been on your team and your technology in terms of managing rights across such diverse territories.
So for the most part, we don't necessarily have to worry about rights. That's handled by our DRM system and our content management system. A lot of that is coordinated around access level and control. The one thing I would say is because a lot of the content, if not all the content today, is owned by the Walt Disney Company, there is certainly there are certainly areas and regions where there are contracts related components to things, but the ability to address those challenges and issues are one that typically gets dealt with in-house, and we'll have conversations around any particular challenges we might have to explore. But to my knowledge, there's nothing specifically required for us to enforce access control or things of that nature outside of the standard things you might do on traditional CDN control, right? You have your tokenization and you have your standard access control aspects to solutions. But the DRM components of our workflow sit outside of our environment, so that's a little different. I don't know much more to add there.
Okay. So another question along the lines that we've heard today consistently is, we've heard about ESG, environmental sustainability governance. And obviously, as we, as an industry, change the way people consume content, we also have a level of responsibility for making sure that, we're not using so much power that we're losing some of the benefits that we were trying to get to with streaming. How do you all balance the sort of performance environmental concerns, especially as you go into emerging markets?
It's a great question. It's one that I think for where we are right now as we're continuing to expand, it's not that it's not important, it just hasn't made it to the top of our concern list. Mm-hmm. Right, our customer performance is continuing to drive a lot of the decision making that we do. We want to ensure they have peak performance and deliverables and have the top experience possible. That said, right now a lot of our work is done through commercial providers and open caches, and so we're looking towards those vendors to ensure that they're doing the right things from a sustainability and environmental standards approach. And based on everything we're hearing, everyone's kind of moving in that direction. As we continue to expand our footprints, we are being cognizant of what we're expanding and how we're building to ensure we're not over expanding or overbuilding for any specific market or region. We're trying to be smart about deployments, smart about locations that we're placing our mid-tier environments in, which is where our effectively, you can call it an origin shield. Smart about where we're placing those and ensuring that they're aligned for peak performance, but also that they're not overexpanded to such a point that they're wasteful, if you will.
Thank you.
And from a technology point of view, I mean, Rob mentioned that we have this central control plane, and the control plane is developed from the point of view of plugging in different kind of rule sets for selecting CDNs, and these can be rule sets which are purely based on performance or cost, but they are being extended to support business rules as well too. Some of them are already kind of baked in. So as the landscape kind of evolves and as we get more feedback, it's becomes a easier approach for us to actually incorporate these new rules into our kind of main control plane that does a CDN decisioning.
Well, and that makes sense. I mean, if you measure a KPI against it, then you can try to hit a target. Yeah, fair point. Eric?
Yeah, I'd like to come back to something I started with, referring back to the changes we've seen during the pandemic, specifically Disney Plus pivoted somewhat to start offering PVOD premieres with Mulan was, I believe, the first one. How did that affect your team and your ability and what you needed to do to deliver that content? Again, both technologically and from a manpower perspective.
And also from a consumer expectation standpoint, when somebody's paying an additional.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things that I'd like to consider, and then I'd like to pass to Rob for some of the performance notes on that. But the first thing I would say around Premier Access, which is what we call that for our premium titles, it's something that, while it bore out of the pandemic, it's clearly a very useful aspect for customers to be able to enjoy a piece of content at home. And it seems to be something that has been a natural organic aspect to the platform that we've seen great performance on. I particularly remember when we launched Mulan, watching it at home and being very impressed with the work that our video encoding team did in taking those. And it's clear that, as we have access to those masters and as we're able to prepare that content for a premium experience at home, we're able to preserve it with Dolby Vision, with Dolby Atmos, ensuring it's a really immersive experience from a content standpoint. And then on top of that, our area of concern is, okay, if those files are really large now and they're high quality, can we make sure we're delivering those to all of our customers in the right way at a premium experience? And that's something that ensures that we're consistently growing, we're consistently expanding the team. I mean, it's not up yet, but we got 2 more roles to come shortly for the team. So keep your eyes peeled, reach out to me if you're interested. But it's something that, while we're growing from a manpower standpoint, we're also looking to solve it from a continued technology standpoint and continued performance analysis standpoint. And so for that, Rob, I'll pass to you on what we do around Premier Access titles.
Yeah, so I'll pitch. We got Cruella coming out on the 28th, by the way. So I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, to Eric's point, the cinematic releases, and actually even the weekly episodics that we release now have such a higher average bit rate than our general library, which might include older content that had been re-encoded at some point, that we actually have to, live up to certain higher KPIs, right? Or we want to hit certain higher average bit rates. I can't compare something like the launch of Cruella and the average bit rate that we're doing on a particular ASN or over a particular CDN to our general title, our entire library, because you can't really compare them. And to your point, Tim, like there are certain levels of performance that need to be met that for these customers that, as they're paying for it, they expect a better experience. We actually had Conviva build a new metric in for us, and it's called Zero CIR. I don't know if they did it specifically for Disney or if but they certainly did it with our input. And this was a metric by which we wanted to say, how many people ended their play of that cinematic release without having a single buffer. And so that is like our new go-to metric for these types of releases, where, our measure of quality of experience is that you should be able to watch this episode or this cinematic release from start to finish without a single buffer. And that, that KPI is something that we hold quite high now for these things. But we do, for every cinematic release, we have a new process, a new workflow that we do, and we have all eyes on glass for it, and we do the release. And there's certain things that we have to address, but I think we're out of time.
Yes, Dom is about to ring the bell.
I just wanted to add something, and Eric, you said this about how good the video encoding was for Mulan. Raya and the Last Dragon, of course, is getting ready to come off premiere to normal. I took one of my girls to see it in the theater, and it'll be really interesting now, having had that cinematic experience, to see whether the consistency is there for me. In the old days when we would go watch something in the theater and then watch it on stream, you sort of gave the stream a little bit of, okay, fine. But having seen what Mulan looked like on my home screen, I'm expecting the same cinematic quality out of Raya.
Raya blew me away. I wrote to that team when they did it, the team behind the code. It blew me away from a visual standpoint.
Nice.
I'm going to cut you off there. That was an awesome session. Thank you so much, Eric, Rob, and Pankaj. That was brilliant. Eric and Tim, thank you for hosting it. It's been a pleasure to hear all of those insights, and an absolute treat to have that fireside. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you very soon.